story really is about, to be honest with you. 'Cause I don't get it. How's your son doing?
He's doing awesome. We're in Toronto this week.
I've seen you wearing your. Well, talk to
Yes,
you.
yeah, I know. I know
Oh
you look
my.
amazing as always.
You are so sweet. Boy, my
Oh my
father sends
goodness.
his love. He
Oh,
was having a tough moment. And I don't like to leave my mother alone.
no, I understand.
And so,
I
but actually
understand.
he wanted to go out and he was like, I want to go out. We were like, no, please. Just, if you go to sleep, you can have a full day tomorrow. Really. He doesn't want to hear any of that. But here we
Oh
are.
wow.
But I'm going to get right to you because I need you to explain this to me because I don't know. I'm trying to, particularly the rigged poker games. I don't get.
Yes.
I need to understand why that's so impactful. But we're going to come up right now. Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. The NBA is embroiled in quite a story. And so I said, you know what? I'm trying to figure out what is happening here. We've got insider trading, really insider betting, non-public information that was disclosed to people, which could shape their bets, like who might not be playing tonight, who might have to leave early, who might have an injury, who might be feigning an injury, right? But then there's a rigged poker scandal. And they were very, very careful in the media to say that the Italian mafia were at the center of it. But it's very interesting because you got a whole lot of different kinds of mafiosi. And I think I'm trying to figure out who the real beneficiaries were and what the charges could be and how this will impact the career of an NBA legend who had moved into coaching, a winning coach, a young man who's got a stellar career, and others. What is happening? And how could things, well, how could we be at this kind of impasse for their careers? What's going to happen here? There is a presumption of innocence, but certainly that's not how it's been presented today. I said, let me reach out to a few people. None other first among them is attorney Shannon Holmes. Of course, he and attorney C.K. Hoffler have been talking not only just about sports law, but NILs, helping people with their images, catching people when they're very, very young so that they can, what does your book say? Chief executive athlete, how to run your career like a Fortune 500 company. What happened here? Help me to understand what the charges are, because certainly if someone feigns an injury or is injured, or if it's not public information that a star player, a marquee player, is going to be playing or might have to drop out, that would alter the betting. And I want you to help me to understand that, help us all to understand that. But the poker games, I just saw a report on CNN where people using contact lenses, and my goodness, it felt like Ocean's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I said, I didn't even know all that went on. Okay, so help me to understand who's involved, Chauncey Billups, etc. What is going on here? And have careers been altered? Can anyone come back from this? Let me just start at the beginning. Attorney Shannon Holmes.
Well, thank you, Santita, for having me. Always a pleasure to be on. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Absolutely.
Let's start with your first question. Have careers been altered? Obviously, yes. To what degree, we don't know. As you mentioned earlier, there's a presumption of innocence. Now, what we know historically is the feds typically have a pretty strong case. We rarely see them move and or act if they don't have a strong case. If I can pivot for just a second, I think it's quite interesting here. We just had a very interesting scenario play out in this country about a week or two ago where a longtime U.S. attorney prosecutor declined to prosecute Letitia James,
Yes.
Attorney General Letitia James, because he didn't think there was enough there. So comparing that to this, we have prosecutors who thought they had gathered enough evidence through their investigation that there was enough there. So I just wanted to share that with you to point out that typically they only move when I say they, meaning the U.S. government,
Hmm.
U.S. Attorney's Office, FBI, when they feel like they have enough to move on.
Well, let me ask
With
you this.
that,
So the
yes,
investigations are lengthy then,
yes, yes,
and
very
they.
lengthy. I think what I've read, and again, forget I haven't read every piece. I did listen to the entire live press conference today, but I have not read what they have published so far. But it looks like it goes far back as 2023. And if that's the case, we're talking nearly 2 years or more, depending on when it started in 2023. Um, so you asked about, let's start with the easier one, if you will, regarding the games. Um, it's as simple as to, to describe if I'm going to bet on the outcome of a ball game. I presume that what's being reported in terms of who's available to play, who's playing, how long they will play, everyone's healthy, who's healthy. And there's usually a list that comes out every day. There's a certain time the list has to come out for NBA games every day to determine who's going to play, who's not going to play. And so that sets the stage for how the sports betting business is based on, right? What the odds will be. And so you make your bet based on that information. Now, if you have access to information from people on the inside, whether it's a coach or a player, that could obviously alter your bet, which could impact the outcome of that bet, right? The second piece to this, which is more interesting, is that when you have a person that is actually in position to make that alter that situation, meaning a player who will then say to the bettor, I am going to do something, whether put myself in the game, take myself out, miss a shot, make a shot, have a turnover, do things that will impact the bet that they want to have happen and how they want that bet to go. Let me give it to you this way. Santita, if you if you in your home always fix tacos on Tuesday, and there was some sports wager and betting place to bet that you're going to have tacos on this Tuesday, and I bet that you're going to have tacos on Tuesday, but then someone from your home gives me a tip that you've decided to have short ribs on Tuesday, and so I bet that you will not have tacos on Tuesday. But all along, everyone always bets that Santita is going to have tacos on Tuesday, but for the fact that someone inside gave me inside information so that I would now alter my bet to bet against you having tacos so that I will have a greater benefit to my bet.
How are they able to go? Okay, you know about the intake process for these professional football teams and baseball teams and NBA teams and soccer teams. When you're bringing people into these professional leagues, then I would think even college, is there a process by which the players are told this is what people are going to come to you and they're going to try to tempt you? And particularly now that sports betting is allowed, isn't it allowed in the NBA now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, let me see, what does that mean?
So now, not only is it allowed, there are now sports betting facilities inside the arenas. If we go out and we talk about the NFL, the new arena that was built for the Los Angeles Rams
Rams.
in LA,
Hmm.
they have a deal there is a sports betting facility in that new stadium. That was part of their overall concept and construction. And so that exists and not only in some of the NFL arenas, but I think also in some of the NBA arenas. But with that, betting is allowed, right, by the fans. There are very strict rules for the players in terms of them betting on their sport, in their sport. There's some very strict rules that each one of their collective bargaining agreements have laid out. And Santita, I can tell you that every year they are they get tons of information about sports betting. I would imagine they get more information about sports betting than anything else from their union perspective.
It just sounds like to me when you bring betting into the arena, that doesn't sound like that's a good idea. It seems to me that that is a formula for disaster. It's just a thought. Something
Well,
about that. Oh, well, help me
well,
understand
for,
because I
for
don't.
for many years, the reason there were never any professional teams in Las Vegas was
Oh,
because of sports betting. It
okay.
wasn't until the leagues lifted the ban on sports betting and they decided that it would be okay to have professional teams in Las Vegas, i.e., why we now have the Las Vegas Raiders, you
Hmm.
now have the WNBA team there, you now have the NHL hockey team there, and I think they're about to have one of the baseball teams, I think, is about to move there. And so again, it's been this battle. Again, if I can use another analogy like I used earlier, it's kind of like the marijuana. Do we legalize it? Do we not legalize it? People are doing it. They're making money. So do we incorporate sports betting into our world so that, if they're going to do it, we can benefit from it?
Who was charged? Because from what I can understand, there are two different scenarios that we're looking at. We're looking at
Yes.
the betting on the games, and then
Yes.
we're also looking at the rigged poker games. Let's start with the betting on the games and who was involved there, because I understand an active player was involved in that.
Yes. An active player, I think it's Terry Rozier,
Hmm.
current, well, up through today, he was a current player with the Miami Heat. And the recent report I listened to, the press conference talked about there is actual evidence of him communicating with other parties who I guess were charged as well about how he was going to conduct himself in that particular night's game. And I think in this instance, he was going to take himself out at a certain point. Let me set the stage. The sports books base their bets and their odds on what they expect a player to do. They may expect a player to score 10 points that particular night, have 3 rebounds and 1 turnover. And so he set it up such that he would take himself out before he reached the 10 points, right? So in that instance, if I'm a bettor, I would bet against him reaching those goals, right? And he's going to assist me in that by taking himself out, faking an injury, saying he's fatigued, whatever the case may be, so he can ensure that he doesn't reach that 10-point threshold. And if I'm betting against what he does, and there are all sorts of, you can bet that he will do certain things, and bettors can bet against someone doing certain things. So in that instance, because they had the inside information, they would wage large sums of money against the person and or the team accomplishing its goals. And because those odds are set a certain way, they would have a huge return on their investment.
Is there ever any suspicion? Like, I mean, if a player becomes inconsistent, I mean, of course we're all human. You can have an injury, you can have an off night,
Hmm. Hmm.
but sometimes I have been to games and I've gone, something happened here. I don't know. I can't.
Right.
It didn't
Right.
feel right. But you don't
Right.
say anything,
Right.
and I don't say anything because half the time we know these people, or we know the owners or somebody, and
Right.
it would be in bad taste to say something. But you sure do start thinking about it. Come on, Shannon.
Absolutely. There is suspicion. I mean, we can look historically, and if we had the time, we could go through and look at. I mean, way back, I think it was the Chicago. Well, your
Black
hometown was
Sox.
the Black Sox. That goes back to the early days of baseball. So
Hmm.
there have been a number of scandals. There was one in the either Northwestern or Boston College in the
Hmm.
70s or 80s. There have been a number that have been widely reported, and each one of them, from my understanding, I say that a lot of them, I should say, have included the mafia in some way. And that's the interesting thing about this case is that these guys are somehow tied into the large mafia, Italian mafia families of New York, which is really scary.
Why? But why is that so? I mean, because they made such a big deal about the mafia involvement. And let's be very clear. Um, in entertainment, you have the mafia components,
Hmm.
on whether it's music or sports.
Hmm.
That is something that Michael Jackson fought against that in the music industry.
Hmm.
It wasn't the Italian mafia, it was the Jewish mafia. I mean, it's just,
Right.
you got mafiosi control that space.
Right.
So is it really, well, I was wondering why they amplified the mafia's involvement before we bring in Clarence Hill, who's in his car down there in Dallas. All you Texans, I don't know what to do. But,
Well, that's one of my close friends, so
well,
that'll be fun.
I'm gonna bring him on up. But I want you to help. No, I need you to help me to understand what was going on with the amplification of the mafia involvement. I mean, because now that makes me look at the games, just generally speaking, I look at it through another lens.
Well, that's the thing. As I told a coach client of mine today, I reserve some comments because despite how strong the federal cases typically are, there's still a presumption of innocence, right? And there's still we don't get to see everything that they have, and we don't get to hear necessarily what the those that have been charged, what their defenses are. And to hype up this idea that the mafia is involved, to what extent we just don't know yet, but they clearly made it a point um, to highlight that. But the other side is, the fact that they are mentioning that, raises a lot of questions, right? How deep is this? How deep does this go? How involved are they? Is this just on outside in terms of betting, or how deep does this go through the organizations, through the locker rooms? And I'm looking forward to hearing more about that for sure.
Well, and do they? Yeah, just generally speaking. I mean, how pure is the sport, right? Now, I mean, just how clean is it? Can we
So
really? Because people ask those questions about who gets into the championships. Do
so
people
I'll tell you, I'm a purist when it comes to sports, right? I don't like instant replay. I think we shouldn't have instant replay.
really?
I like the fact that players are going to make a mistake, coaches are going to make a mistake, officials going to miss a call. But to me, that's the pureness of the game. And some days your team's going to win because of that. Sometimes your team's going to lose. But I mean, it's part of the sport now. But I just wanted to set the stage that I kind of like the pureness of the sport. And so when we have these things occur, yeah, it certainly questions, where do things stand?
Well, Clarence Chill Hill, oh, this is too rich. Oh my goodness. Down there in Texas, wait, there's something about you guys in Texas because you all have a lot of sports down there, really on the college level and on the professional level. You do it big in Texas. But help me to understand, Mr. Dallas, Mr. Cowboys man, all Dallas, help me to understand, help us to understand what we're looking at. Because the more that they just, even on CNN, had a professional card shark trying to take us through how they have the lenses and the cameras can X have an X-ray through the poker table. I was like, what is going on here? I feel like I'm Danny Ocean. What is
Yeah, it's crazy. And professional sports are a dirty game. They've always been a dirty game.
okay?
It's- They've been dirty. Y'all talk. I heard you two guys talking about the Black Sox scandal, and there've been a number of scandals, betting scandals, going to college sports. I mean, it's been there. You know,
Mhm.
New York, the building of the stadium. I mean, one of the mafia members supposed to be buried under that the giant stadium. I mean, it's
That's
it's
right.
it's 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 the all of that, and they got their tentacles and everything. One thing that I remember just covering the Cowboys. Jerry Jones talked about when he was in the 20s, he got a loan from the mafia
Hmm.
to buy a football team, and his daddy told him don't take it
Hmm.
because if you can't repay it, we all dead.
Jimmy Hoffa.
And so they've been involved in sports a long time. And you brought up music, and we all know that. And you talked about why the mafia. I think that most of us, the naive, think the only mafia is the cartels. Like that stuff ended. when all those families got allegedly taken down, and all the mafia heads got taken down, and now we're doing movies about it, and we're more romanticizing mafia figures and stuff like that, and different things, and we don't think that exists, but it's real. It's still real. They still have their tentacles on America. They still are doing stuff in America. It's not just the big bad cartels out of Mexico that they want us to fear. The mafia is still real. And you go back to this card thing, and I'm most disappointed in Charles Sibilis because why are you involved in this? Why are you involved in
Mhm.
this? You made a lot of money. You're a champion. His daughter plays soccer at Texas. You got a beautiful family. Um,
No,
why
well,
are
no.
you involved in this?
Explain who he is. For those of us who don't follow the NBA, I mean,
Mr.
I follow it, but he's a big guy. And when I heard his name, it made me
Yeah,
bolt upright. I said, "Wait a minute, what are you saying, Chauncey Billups?"
yeah, Mr. Big
Mhm.
Shot, world champion with the Detroit Pistons. He's
Yeah.
a coach. He's made over $100 million in his NBA career. He had a long NBA career. Made over $100 million. Um, he's making several $1 million as coach of the Portland Trailblazers. You know, this betting thing is something else, and maybe he got in deep, and the mafia got their fingers tentacles into him, and they made him do that because they're saying he's been the face of these rigged poker games. So that's why they were showing you the rigged poker games. Okay, and he's the face of these poker games. Get high stake gamblers to come play poker, where they have glasses that can see the cards and everything else to rob people of money, and people have lost millions of dollars in these poker games. And so that's part of his connection. As part of his also connection is how he uses lineups. Same thing with Terry Rozier in basically fixing games, and helping guys make money on prop bets or over and under, or how many points somebody makes, and stuff like that. And so I certainly it's deeper than these three. You
Mhm.
have to know that. But just like anything, any mafia business is deeper than the guys that arrest. But they want their pound of flesh, and they want their highlights. I mean, let's be honest. Let's give y'all something to talk about rather than those Epstein lists, right?
Right.
Let's give the world something to talk about. Let's give America, and we can
Mhm.
hand over some black guys and NBA, and everybody gonna talk about that. We're not even asking about the Epstein list anymore.
But see, and that's so glad you went there because Clarence Hill Jr. and Attorney Shannon Holmes, Virginia Giuffre's book just came out. A prime minister was named as someone who had raped her and who had absolutely abused her. And then you had a lawyer coming out saying, "Oh no, I got the names. I just didn't put them in the book." And suddenly, and this was literally a day and 2 days ago, and now I've got this. And they're spending more time talking about this. And of course, you know, when you destroy the public trust, or when you do that, that is a bad thing. But no one's talking about the Epstein files now. I mean, and you see Cash Patel and his little windbreaker, FBI windbreaker, and I'm like,
And those eyes, those eyes,
oh,
those criminal eyes of him, those mistrusting eyes of him. I mean, like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
this is the most
Those
horrible.
eyes are something else. Like, I would never put him in charge. I mean, I can't trust. I can't trust those eyes.
Right. Right. And he just sounds like he's up to something. When he
He
shows up, he
looks like
just
he's up
sounds
to
like he's up
something.
to something. Yep.
He lacks credibility. His face lacks credibility, and
Right.
everything associated with him. How he got hired, how he got put, who he works for, all of that is just it's crazy. But just as far as these charges are concerned, I mean, Gilbert Arenas, they arrested him. I don't know if you remember Gilbert Arenas, Agent
Yes.
Hmm.
Zero. He was arrested last summer, for allegedly renting a home that they had one of these games in. And he basically said, I'm
Hmm.
telling everything.
Right.
Because all I did was rent the homes. I wasn't playing the games. I had nothing to do here. I'm just renting the homes. And
Right.
and he's not been arrested again.
Right.
He's actually on his podcast talking about how he basically was a snitch. I'm telling on everybody.
Well, but well, then let me ask you this: Is that not? Is there something in the psyche of these men? Because people talked about, oh,
Gambling is addictive. It is all of that. I mean sports gambling. That's why they were trying to keep sports gambling out of sports because it is addictive, and it's uh that's the only thing you can talk about. I mean, why are you gambling? Why is
Right.
this? You know, people want to be involved in this and stuff like that. People with money. I mean, it's not like you're broke. You're not looking to, you know, for the next meal for your family with this stuff. It's an addictive habit.
let's see. But I'm
Yeah.
wondering about the players because some of the biggest players in these sports are known to have big gambling habits, or at least
Yes,
that's rumored. I won't mention any names.
this guy will say Michael Jordan.
Yeah. Michael Jordan. Yeah, we know.
Oh, okay. I
I mean,
mean, well, I
we
get
know he had to go play baseball because they secretly banned him for his gambling. At least
now
that's
that I
one of the
did not
rumors.
that I didn't know. Okay, okay. Oh, well,
Yeah.
I've got the vapors. Okay, because all this happened in Chicago, and everybody was trying to figure it out. But
One of the
hey,
most mob corrupt cities in the country.
well, that's true. That's how we do it. That's why we do it in the shy. But so, and that's why look at him. He's the goat, the greatest who's ever done it. Right? What is it in the thinking? I'm asking you all to play armchair psychologist, but you know the lawyer. You are the confessor. People confess to you, Shannon. You know
Hmm.
these people inside out. You have to. Come on. You know these folks inside out. You know Clarence. You know these people. You know them. And you understand what makes them tick. You can see them coming. That's why that's why I appreciate what you're doing, Shannon, with these young people. When you try and catch them early and you try to warn them about the things that are
Yeah.
coming their way because they don't understand. Clarence, I know you try to just on the side talk to some of these kids and say, "Hey, I want you to understand some things." What is it in the makeup of these highly competitive, and I would dare say even some of the greatest players?
I
They
think you just,
they
I
have a
think you
grip.
nailed it. Yeah, they're highly competitive. I mean, they're competing at everything, whether it's, getting to work early, first one at work, first one to score, first one to do. I mean, they find all sorts of things to compete in. I mean, they're competing on the buses, they're competing on the planes, they're competing in the locker room, their card games, and all sorts of other things happening. Now, when we talk about a Michael Jordan, obviously, he could handle that, right? He had the financial wherewithal. People just didn't like the fact that he bet big money, right? It's just not what we normally hear about from our athletes, where they're betting really big money, high stakes games, but he could afford it. But some of these other guys aren't so capable, and they get themselves in some very tight spaces.
Yeah,
The competitive juices are flowing, but their money, they don't necessarily have the money to back up their competitive juices. And so I think that's where guys really get jammed up.
I
Go
mean,
ahead, Chill.
it's definitely competition. I mean, let's go back to dice, or quarters,
Right.
or whatever else, or marbles. I mean, people have been betting on that stuff since they were kids. And you
Right.
talk about the card games and in college, or dominoes, or right now golf. Golf is high stakes betting. People bet. Big
Yep.
golfers, and they most of the people who golf is a sport of means. They bet.
Right.
And it's not just the athletes. I got a
That's right.
buddy. I went to the Mavericks game last night, and he's sitting there and he's betting on props on everything. And I called him degenerate. I mean, he's betting on over unders and somebody's gonna make a certain amount of points. I mean, that's what the betting industry they're feeding off of that. You see, they call it fantasy betting, and it's not just they try to soften it up and with prize picks and it's not just you don't just have to go to Vegas. You have to just go to back rooms. Kids are betting. I know friends whose kids are in high school who doing this stuff online with the online betting and the fantasy betting and different things like that, and how many points somebody's going to score, or how many yards they're going to rush for in football, or how many tackles they're going to make. All of that. I mean, that's why you go back to people play, um, fantasy, or the I can't even think. What's
But like fantasy football and things like
fantasy football is
Mhm.
is a driver
Yeah,
driver of the richness of the game. It has helped multiply the game by millions and billions of dollars. Fantasy football. There were times when people, or just like the NCAA basketball tournament, the brackets.
right.
Just regular people. I remember a time when people going to jail for brackets. But yeah, that's all part of the competitive juices. Everybody most people gamble. They want to bet on something, and and it's an ego. It's got competition. It is all of that, and there's money and there's big money behind it. When you're talking about when there's big money behind it, it's gonna be dirty money behind it.
And repercussions when you don't, if you can't pay. I think that's the part that gets left out, right?
Yeah,
Is people want to bet, but people don't want to talk about what happens if you can't pay if you lose.
yeah,
And that's where we find ourselves, well, these guys potentially find themselves dealing with people in the quote unquote underworld who is now saying, hey, you owe me. And to pay me back, I need you to do
right.
this or that. I need you to take this action or not take this action or to give me information or to, you know, find information for me. So I think that's where guys find themselves really jammed up.
Yeah, but it, but
Um,
but it's hypocritical because ESPN is now have a betting service, ESPN Bet.
right,
All these
right,
media companies, are aligned with betting. All these leagues. There were a time when NFL would not align themselves with betting companies. Now
right,
they're being sponsored by the betting company. There were times when
right,
NFL would not let players do anything in Vegas. Now everybody's trying to get teams in Vegas
that's
and
right.
get in bed with the betting companies. The NBA, they're talking about getting a team in Vegas. Baseball's trying to get a team in Vegas. You know, it's hypocritical to a certain extent. One of the big stories that happened yesterday, and Shannon is, he's involved with college sports. College sports, NCAA made a rule yesterday that allowed college players to bet on pro sports.
Mhm.
That's dangerous.
Why?
That's
Okay.
very dangerous.
What are they betting with? They're not supposed to be making money, right? Now they got all this NIL money. They're betting. If you're betting on pro sports, you're gonna bet on college sports. I mean, once you start betting and you start winning, and that's why we always say there's no perfect crime, but the ego always catches up to you. Think you're gonna get away with it. Just like going back to Pete Rose when he started betting on his own team, he's betting on
Mhm.
baseball and stuff like that. If you're gonna bet on things you don't know or you're not involved in, why would you not bet on things you know that you have a hand in?
And Sure, I think the other piece is again, are they mature enough to handle and understand what happens if you lose? And then what happens is most people, when they get jammed up, they bet and lose, and they have enough money to bet again, and they usually try to increase that bet to make up for what they lost. And that's a repetitive cycle. So then they start getting money from other sources to try to dig themselves out of a hole. And next thing you know, you're way deeper than you ever imagined, and tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases, millions of dollars lost
But the
that you
betting
can't.
but the betting industry has fueled sports, college sports, pro sports,
Yeah,
boxing, horse racing. That is what has fueled the economy of sports is the betting industry.
And
right.
dogfighting. That was to
Yeah,
me part
all of
of
that.
the tragedy.
Yeah, it's all
And
of that. But we don't want to, we're cruel, this cruelty to the dogs.
no,
So
no,
so
no.
Michael Vick got sent to jail.
I'm saying it's awful, but it's a huge sport. People don't even know that.
Dog
And
That's
fight,
right.
cockfighting is a huge
Fighting, right.
sport that
It's
people
huge
don't know.
sport. Some parts of the country, right.
Some parts of this country, certainly parts of the world, they do cockfighting. So
Yeah.
they've been doing that.
but where do you see this story going? I mean, because it has been amplified, today. And I mean, and Clarence, you bring up the fact that it almost feels like a diversion, but it is important, you know, um, because more and more Americans mistrust everything that we see, and it's like sports. Hey, look, I know that there is corruption everywhere, but you certainly don't want to see it on the field of play. That's too much.
Can I just share that from a legal perspective? Here's the thing that's really gonna trip these guys up, and we won't know until we get all the facts. But I can tell you, when it comes to the federal laws, the way the statutes are written, I mean, if you do something with or without intent, they can prosecute you and charge you.
What do you
And
mean?
so So if these guys, so they've charged them under from very broad statutes, right? Money laundering for the most part and wire fraud, right? So if you and somehow you moved money electronically that they can show that you got some ill-gotten gains, you're likely going to be indicted. Oh, I'm sorry, not indicted. You're likely going to be found guilty for that. It's just that simple. That's why when we go back to, as Chill was talking, we talk about the old school mafia, the New York, Chicago gangsters, etc. They were able to usually, when they usually got them, it wasn't some of the murders, it wasn't some of the other things they were doing. It was usually wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. Those are very, the way those laws are written, $1 moved is enough for a conviction, right? So that's where these guys will be tripped up a bit. Um, if they're going to have their bank accounts. They've already talked about they were moving money through friend to friend apps. So we're talking like Cash App, Zelle, Venmo, things like that. They've already traced that money. They've already talked about one of the deals with Terry Rozier. Uh, Provided insider information. That information benefited one of the bettors. They had huge gains on that, and they went to his house and divvied up the cash. So then what did he do with that cash? If he moved that cash in any way, shape, form, or fashion electronically, that's considered wire fraud and money laundering because he hasn't shown how he made the money. And the money was made through illegal means, right? So those are the types of things, those technicalities. I've seen them where I've seen them go as far as a guy who is a financial advisor move money out of a client's account minutes before the client sent the consent form to saying he could do so. Client agreed to it verbally, but didn't send the consent form and get charged with a federal offense. And so I share that just to say that if you hit enter and move money on that wire, you can be you can be found guilty.
Was there a triggering event? Do you know what started the investigation? Do you have any idea? I mean, can you speculate at all? Like,
No,
because
I
I
mean,
haven't.
I don't know. I mean, I don't. I mean, this is. I mean, there have been a number of players who have been suspended and for betting. Malik Beasley. Different guys. Terry Rozier was suspended basically last year. Uh, there's been rumors going on for the last couple of years, but I don't know if there was one triggering event that started it all. And apparently, the feds have been investigating for a while, you know,
Hmm.
yeah,
and and I think they just told the NBA to back off because the NBA was doing its own investigation and basically cleared these guys. Well, being cleared by the NBA and being cleared by the feds are two different things. And so I think they just told the NBA to stop the investigation because we got this, and we're going to let them keep going and let them see what they do. And so this is what happened today. I certainly think that they wanted to make a big deal today to start the NBA season. They could have done this anytime. They were
Right.
they were definitely trying to embarrass the NBA. Starting, the season just started on was that Tuesday.
Tuesday, right.
The fact that they did all this today was tactical, purposeful, uh, and certainly it does. If you look at all of in light of everything else that's going on in the world with the administration, with them signing a deal with Argentina for meat and stuff like that, and doing our farmers bad and stuff like that, and uh, this was purposeful. This was tactical. And to break the news, and this is all everybody's talking about today for sure. They could have done this in the summer. I don't. They didn't just tie this up this week.
because didn't they let Chauncey Billups? Didn't they investigate him and let the investigate and they found him not guilty? Is that what
Mm,
happened?
Wouldn't see what I'm saying? The NBA did some investigation. They can't find
Hmm.
anybody not guilty. It's not a
Well,
court.
I mean, just can they let what do they do then after the investigation? Either
They
they
ended the investigation, said they didn't find anything, but I think that was more
Right.
about the Fed saying we got this. The big boys saying, like, prosecution when feds can tell a local police, y'all stop messing with him. we're investigating now. You can do that. I mean, I watched Little Law and Order. Okay, when Law and Order, when the feds come in and tell the local police, leave this alone. This is not your case.
Yeah,
We got this.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Well, and like
and basically,
in the press conference today, they talked about all the coordinating agencies, right? So it was NYPD, the FBI, Homeland Security, U.S. Attorney's Office, Port Authority. So it was a collection of agencies
that
out in
trumped
New
the
York.
NBA. That trumped the NBA
Yeah, yeah,
investigation.
yeah, yeah. The NBA, yeah. I mean, but they said the NBA cooperated as they should and as they would, right? They want to,
They
that's the
they
proper thing to
cooperated
do.
by standing down.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct. Well, they
yeah,
also cooperated by providing data, right?
right,
What I mean by that is they had to provide data and statistics, game logs, decisions that were made. They had to provide data from these games to counter so that the analysts could look at what happened. So to support what they're alleging in these indictments, right? So
right,
the NBA had a role to play in terms of providing information.
right.
Do you think they had any idea that this was coming?
The NBA,
Oh,
yes.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, no, I mean the players and Chauncey Billups,
No, no,
No.
no, they didn't.
because his lawyer said, Chauncey Billups' lawyer said, he cried foul. He said you didn't give him a chance to self surrender. You wanted to have him do a perp walk.
Yeah,
So okay. So
Yeah.
help me to understand why that happened that way. Because
Well,
clearly
that
they had
could
been
be
talking.
interesting. Yeah, that now if they had been and this has been happening lately, um, this has been happening lately. There have been situations lately where they have been they in some instances they're not allowing people to turn themselves in. um, which has been unique, and it's probably more about this administration than anything else. Just kind of what they're how they want to handle things. But yeah, typically when they're talking to you, they will, when they're talking to legal counsel and they're saying, "Hey, this may be coming down the pipe," they'll usually allow you to turn yourself in.
But I mean, this is so uneven. They let some people turn themselves in. And I
Right.
mean, we just had Mr. Holman, who was caught in a $50,000 bribe, and the president wrote it off. So I'm just trying to figure out what this is really about here. I mean, is this a shell game or is it this serious?
I
I
think,
mean,
like Phil said, I mean, it's been going on. It's the question is, I just look forward to the unveiling of more information. What I've seen so far, again, the feds usually get it right, but that's not to say that there can't be, this big bag approach, and there could be some things that fall apart here. We just have to wait and see.
is there anything that you can do when you're talking to your clients? Um, and to you, Shannon, and to you, Clarence. First, you, Shannon, when you're talking to clients, particularly young people, well, they're all young, high school, college, the professional level. I mean, they are young. What do you tell them about avoiding something like this?
Well, like I always tell people, and I share this with my clients, there are two things that are not up for discussion with me, and that's my liberty and my license. Those are my law license and my liberty aren't up for discussion. Like we can't talk about that. Anything that's going to jeopardize that, right?
Mm.
So it's the same thing I would tell my clients, right? You got to operate, as I always say, especially as an athlete, operate as a CEO, CEA. You're running the company. Are you going to jeopardize the company with some really risky decision to chase a couple of dollars? So we stress that we try to put the right people around them, positive role models. We try to suggest people like Magic Johnson and others who've conducted themselves well, both during their playing career and post playing career. Um, so though, we talk about Bridgman, who was an
Mhm.
outstanding business person. So we try to give those examples. You try to but you can't make all the decisions for them. You just try to give them all the tools they need to make the right decisions.
Clarence, if a story comes your way, if you hear the rumor of a story, do you feel obligated to report it?
yeah. I mean, that's my job. I mean, my
Okay.
job is to report the story, as it comes to you, and you rather me write it than somebody else write it, but it's gonna come out. I mean, When salacious things happen, there's no hiding from it. You might as well get out in front of it, and you want somebody else to write. At least may have your perspective, but you can't bury it or hide from it because it's going to come out whether I write it, somebody else is going to write it. So uh, that's what it is. But I mean, again, it's hard to it's hard to tell people not to bet and not to gamble and not to play fantasy and not to do this stuff. Play fantasy football, fantasy baseball, fantasy basketball, games of chance. It is woven into our society in all levels, you know. And you just hope people are smarter than that, and how they handle the things and certainly understand, what's at stake, you know. But, you know, everybody loves to go to Vegas, right? Everybody loves, I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, I know older ladies, older people that put their security check in a social security check in that slot machine. And they will stay there
Mm-hmm.
all night. They church buses, from Texas. Gambling's not loud in Texas. Nothing but Texas buses in Louisiana and Oklahoma with older people going to the casino
That's right.
And they know the
all
game.
night
Do they know
long.
that? Do they know that the game is rigged?
The psyche is I'm going to win. I am
The,
going to
the
win.
the joy, they get so much joy out of just going and doing it. And yeah, they
Right.
know they're gonna lose, but they win some back and whatever else, but they enjoy playing the games.
But you know what? It makes me begin to look at when I see athletes get into accidents or something that happens to them. It arouses suspicions. Now, I admit, I don't trust much of anything because I think I've seen just a little bit too much. I really. But this is, I really did feel like this was a bit of a shell game. But then, as they were describing the poker games and all of the ways that you could cheat, that was stunning, and it was enough to make me say, "Well, why would anyone go to Vegas or play one of these card games if they have X-ray machines where you can find out what someone's cards find out what someone's cards that's face down? What is
Because
it?
people like you don't know that.
They do.
There,
You're
there,
right.
there are millions of
Mhm.
people out there who don't know that.
But now that we do,
No, we don't. No, no,
okay.
no. We the average person that doesn't know that. And there's a sucker born every minute, every day, and they don't know that. They really think they can win, and they don't look at that just happened to them, and it's not gonna happen to me because I'm smarter than that.
Well, this question is for attorney Shannon Holmes. What's your view on AAU sports, particularly basketball, being recruiting at young ages? These young ages for these players. I want that for you, Shannon Holmes, and for you, Clarence Hill.
I trying to bite my tongue here. I'm not a big fan of AAU in its current state. Um, I think Chill's a little bit, just a little bit older than me, but I know he remembers when we came up. You had to be an elite player to make a travel team. Only the best of the best made travel teams, and shortly thereafter, Chill, it just became this just AAU, this rec ball that turned into travel teams, that turned into money grabs, and you got guys now that are literally trying to feed themselves and charging outrageous amounts to families and selling this dream that these kids, if they play on their team, they're going to get a scholarship or make it to the NBA. And now it's leaked over into 7-on-7 football, and it's becoming the same type of thing. The late Kobe Bryant talked about it. He thought it needed to be revamped or gone away with. Um, I think there's room for summer basketball. I believe in kids developing their skills, but I don't really uh, like the current state of AAU and what it's doing to so many families, particularly. And that's where I see it. I mean, you see these families who have to make a decision between medical and bills and rent, and then trying to have their kid play AAU, and then God for the cost to go to these games on weekends, and this is every weekend for 6, 8, 10 weeks, and the parents, just because you've paid for your kid to be on the team, which could be upwards of $300 to $7, 8 thousand dollars or more.
Oh
Then
my.
you've got travel expenses for the parents. The parent, even if the kid's travel is covered to go from Texas to Florida, the parent still has to get himself or herself there. And then these parents have other little kids that they've got to bring along. Then when you get to the door of the gym, it's 35, 45, $50 per person per day in some cases.
Yeah.
So the cost associated with it is just not fair to these families. And typically the outcome does not equate to the input.
Yeah.
So I think I would love to see it smash. I don't think it'll happen, but I would love for it to go away and for kids to just be able to play for the game, to develop their skills, and those that will have those. But again, I recognize that some kids do get seen, if you will, by college coaches. But now we're in an era where it's hard to miss a kid, right? With all this technology, if a kid can walk into bubblegum, we're gonna know about it. Every coach in America is gonna know about it, right?
I,
So go ahead, Joe.
yeah, I gotta go. I got another meeting, but I would say this, that it's not just AAU basketball. I think that we pick on AAU basketball, and I think that's the other part of racism is in it, because it's all youth sports. I mean, I think youth
Yes.
sports, because I had
Yep.
a daughter in gymnastics and soccer and travel baseball. It's all a money grab.
Yes.
It is all preying on parents' love for their kids, want for the best of their kids. And so we want to, when my daughter started gymnastics after she loved, uh, not before Simone Biles, um, I can't even think, but anyway, she saw
Dominique
Olympic.
Dawes,
Huh?
Gabby?
Gabby. She saw
Gabby.
Gabby. She
Yeah.
wanted to be a gymnast. And so we started doing gymnastics 2 days a week. Oh, your daughter's great. You need to come into our competitive class. And now we're going 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, and then it's to you. Then you have to pay. Then we go. Then you got to pay for coaches and different coaches for different routines. And gymnastics is expensive. Golf is expensive. Tennis is expensive. Baseball is expensive because they do it year round as well. Summer track. My daughter did summer track and she did club soccer. It's all expensive. We focus a lot on basketball and AAU basketball, but it's all youth sports is a money grab that takes advantage of parents' love for their kids. And it's too
Absolutely.
much, and they make you focus on one sport and do all this other stuff. So, yeah, we can talk about AAU basketball and AAU, but it's not just AAU.
Right.
It's the summer track,
Yeah,
it's
I think he was.
baseball.
I think he was saying. Yeah, I thought he was saying AAU everything, but club volleyball is. I mean,
It's all of
absolutely
it.
ridiculous. So as Chill said, it's all youth sports now. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just it's tough.
Yeah.
I got to run, but I appreciate the conversation. I love to continue the conversation.
Well, I just love you and thank you so much. And be careful out there.
All right, no
Make
problem.
sure you
Thank
have
you.
your
I,
ID.
I think I introduced y'all, didn't I?
No,
Yes, you
I
I
introduced
did.
y'all. Well, it was the
no,
other way
I
around.
introduced I introduced
I
you.
got it through
I
CK.
couldn't get on one day, and I was like, I know this
That's
guy. He'd be
right.
pretty decent. He'll be
There you
decent.
go.
That's
I
right.
think you owe me lunch or something, Chill.
Well, I mean, when I get my
84.
check from Santita, I'll play you lunch. I'll buy you lunch.
Look at this. Ain't that nothing? No,
Thank
I'm gonna
All
let
right, Chill.
I'm gonna let these brothers go, including my brother here from Omega Psi. Right? Because you know what we've got to do? We've got to talk about these food lines. This government shutdown is poised to become the longest one in history. Oh, it breaks my heart, Shannon Holmes. So few people have so much, and so many people have so little. And when
Mhm.
I look at sports, you have a lot of parents who are desperate, desperate for their children, desperate to get out from under. And I just see people taken advantage of all the way around. And to me, this was part of it. And I think that, as you say, chill, as Clarence Hill, he
Mhm.
just said,
Mhm.
um, some of this feels like a diversion, but then it's also very serious business. It is very serious business. What would you
Right.
like to say before we go?
Well, again, just wrapping up, like I said, there are two different cases. There's this poker game, which is quite interesting that these guys were looped. Some of these guys are looped into that,
Mhm.
and they brought this at the same time. And then, of course, we've got the sports betting piece. But you know, again, as one who's sworn to uphold the Constitution, I mean, these guys are innocent until proved guilty. You know, again, we can talk about the Fed's typical record. They rarely miss. You rarely see them losing cases of this magnitude. But you know, I'd love to see the forthcoming information. I'm definitely, you know, hated for these guys and prayer for them and their families. And you know, but uh, you know, we'll get more information at some point regarding what actually happened here and how did we get here. You know, and I think that's the question we all have. How did a Chauncey Billups get here? I mean, not only did you have a very successful playing career, you've worked your way up through the ranks. You're a head coach in the NBA.
Oh my God.
There's only 30 of those guys, 30 in the world, 30 head coaches in the NBA. That's it. So you have one of those 30 jobs, and you know, so seven, eight, what is it, 8 figure, 7 figure job, eight
Yeah.
figure job. And
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
you know, how do you, like I said, Clarence said, you know, you got a daughter in college, playing college sports, lovely family. Like, how do we get here? And that's the thing. We just love to have those answers, and hopefully we'll get that at some point. Hopefully we'll get it from him in his truth, whether he's admitting and just want to kind of get it off his chest, or whether he's going to clear his name and say, hey, that's not what happened. But um, looking forward to getting more information for sure.
I hope so, because I don't want to see the lives damaged. I really
Right,
don't. That
right,
breaks. It's heartbreaking. And so
right.
we'll see. Shannon Holmes, everybody, you've got to get the book. You know what I have to tell you? Um, Chief Executive Athlete. Everyone could learn about really treating your career as if it is that of a Fortune 500 company. Chief executive athlete, say chief executive, housewife, whatever it is. You
Right.
can learn a whole lot from this book. Get it, everybody. Get it, get it, get it today. I got several copies and gave them to friends because I said, some people I know, Michael Jackson even set up a board of directors for his life.
Yes.
And so it's something to be said for that. Get the book, everybody. Chief Executive Athlete. You do not want to miss that. Let's talk about these food lines, everybody. These food lines, they are here November 1st. 25 states are looking at cutting off food aid programs. A lot of people are going to go hungry. What's that going to be like? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in 1 minute. AM 950 Radio,